Hello, everybody. My name is Shannon Spasova. I'm from Michigan State University, and I'm one of the webinar coordinators for the International Association for Language Learning Technology. You can find more information about us at IALLT.org. This is a webinar series. We have it about once a month or sometimes more often. All are welcome to the webinar series. And recordings are generally a member benefit, and we hope that you'll consider joining IALLT. This is the way we have the ability to offer services like this. I have asked permission to allow this recording to be open afterwards, but I haven't found out the answer to that yet. So if it does end up being approved to be an open webinar, then later it will be posted on fltmag.org, or sorry, fltmag.com. And FLT Mag is our online publication, and we have a whole bunch of great articles that we've posted recently. And so I hope you will go check that out as well. We also have two other webinar coordinators, Evan Rubin from San Diego State. Thank you so much, Evan, for all the help that you give with the webinars. And also Adolfo Carrillo Cabello from the University of Minnesota. He also helps us out so much. Thank you so much for that. And so if you do have any problems during the webinar, please private chat to Evan, Adolfo, or me. We ask that you keep your microphone muted during the presentation. It just helps to cut down on background noise. If you want to put your video on, that's fine with us, but if you do notice any lag or any internet problems, then probably the first thing to do would be to turn off your video if you have it on. Also, the way we keep track of questions during the presentation is in the chat. So if you would like to open the chat, you just hover over your screen, click chat, and then you're welcome to put in questions and comments as the presentation goes on. And we will be keeping track of those and then asking them of the presenter at an appropriate time. So please feel free to do that. I want to especially thank our presenter for Florencia Henshaw from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, for being with us today and bringing us this great topic. I also just want to mention that we are really delighted that she just joined the editorial board of the FLT Mag as well. So thanks so much to her for the services that she's providing for our community during this time. And she also recently published an article on a different topic in the FLT Mag. So along with the other articles that were recently published, please check that out. Thank you so much, Florencia, for presenting for us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Thumbs
I
up.
have to do the obligatory. Can you hear me? Okay, hopefully I'm not muted, right? I'm not just talking to myself. Okay, everybody, yes, you can hear me. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you, Shannon, so much for this opportunity. This is something that I had actually shared with Shannon a while ago, and we were planning it for November, December, and then she said, I think this is useful for us who now all have to teach online, so can we do it in June? Absolutely. And so the webinar that I have planned for today, let's see if the slide will move. Here we go. Is probably one of my simplest webinars, I would say, or one of my simplest presentations. I'm going to talk about a little bit of why this topic, why the topic of our discussion forums really interactive. And then I have ideas, and more ideas. And then I do want to leave some time for Q&A. I am notoriously bad at running out of time and then not having enough time for questions. So I really want to make sure that we do have time for questions. If you don't have questions, I do encourage you to share your own ideas. So perhaps you see something that you're like, this would be great for X, then share with everybody, because we can all probably learn from that and get inspired by each other's ideas. So I want to talk about a couple of words in the title of my webinar. And the first one is communication. And I see some attendees today that have engaged in long discussions on Facebook as to what is communication. So they will find some of these concepts a little bit familiar. I am going to adopt a very simple, straightforward definition of communication, which is that it has to be involve meaning and it has to involve purpose. So we need to be conveying information, content. I'm not looking to practice a verb, to review vocabulary, right? So this is just conveying content for a purpose. And we can spend a long time discussing what is purpose, but I'm going to simplify it. So what will the audience do with the information? What is the point of me sharing this? What are they going to do with it? The other word that I want to talk about is interactive, right? We say our discussion forums really interactive. So what do I mean by that? So are the learners really paying attention to each other, to what the other person is sharing? And then are they really responding to that person or not? When we think of asynchronous communication online, we picture forums. I'm sure that we've all used them at some point, or we still do. And forums can be great tools. This is not an anti-forum presentation. Some people do blogs. Blogs are a little bit different in that you are the blog owner or author, right? So you keep posting on a weekly basis, for example, and then people can leave comments, but it's different than a forum. We can think of email. That's another way of communicating online asynchronously. And social media posts are another way of communicating asynchronously online. And when I think of all of these, and you think of, for example, social media posts, you see that some people engage in long discussions completely asynchronously, just by replying to somebody, liking, etc., sharing new resources. And usually it's because somebody shares something that made you want to respond, right? Nobody's telling you, you have to respond to at least 2 people. Nobody's telling you it has to be this long. Nobody's telling you you cannot respond with a GIF, right? Everybody responds in their own way. And so that got me thinking as to why are we not doing that in our classes? I'm sure that you've seen lots of blog posts that are about effective discussions in forums, right? And usually those tips include something along the lines of the following: advance the conversation, offer constructive criticism, acknowledge, add, and give evidence. And while these effective discussion tips might work for many subjects, I have always found them very difficult to apply to language teaching, and particularly to novice and intermediate learners, because we're not engaging in large philosophical discussions, or we're not all engaging in discussions of a particular reading or topic. The topics that they talk about are of a personal nature, right? So whether it's their family, their preferences, etc. And so I wonder, like, are they supposed to give each other constructive criticism about their families? Like, that's just not going to happen, right? So they're hard to apply. And then you end up with something like this. And this tweet, I think, summarizes it beautifully, right? So the student says, I love bread. And the response, which is very forced, is, Joe, I agree with you. I love bread too. I like the part when you said you love bread. Great point. And I'm sure that we can all relate to this. At some point, we've seen something like that, where the learners are just stretching and just agreeing with everything and not really paying attention to what they're truly saying, right? They're just doing it because you told them to comment on them. So a lot of the tips out there say that discussion boards are meant to be conversations. And then my question is, are they really? Do you have a minimum word count when you have a conversation? Does anyone require you to respond to a certain number of interlocutors? Do you not respond to someone just because someone else already replied to that person? So I feel like these are my own observations and my own experience being a student in an online class, that discussions should be fluid and natural, but forum posts feel rigid and forced, at least to me. And when I read what my students are writing, it also feels rigid and forced. And they have told me many times, they just feel forced to say something. Students tend to focus much more on the requirements rather than on truly exchanging ideas. And I was an online student who did precisely that. So this is an example of a rubric. This is a general course. This is not a language course, right? But if you know you're going to be evaluated on something like this, you know, post well-developed assignments that fully address and develop all aspects of the task, demonstrates analysis, participates 4 or 5 times throughout the week, it feels like you're probably going to end up forcing yourself to do all this just to do check, check, check. Did I get the points? Did I get the points? So, at least to me, that is not really interactive, right? They're not really exchanging ideas for a purpose. Most times they're just doing it because they want to get full credit. And then I compare it to what happens in class. The activities that we do in class, at least in our program, focus on exchange of meaning to accomplish something concrete. Whether it is somebody describes something and somebody draws it, whether somebody has to ask them questions and they fill out a form, they have to do something concrete with that information. We never tell them, okay, share what you did last week and go, right? Like, that's not something that we do. And we definitely never tell them to just comment or respond. We don't look at a student and say, okay, now you respond to her, right? Like, we would never do that in class. And it feels like that's what we're doing in the discussion forums a little bit. The activities that we do in class usually have some kind of an information gap. And we've also engaged in a long discussion on Facebook as to whether that's good or bad. But in any case, that's what we do in our classes, right? Where I know something, you need that information, we have to work together to accomplish the task. So why not have info gap forums, right? So why not have this prompt where the students are doing something with that information? So the way that I thought about rethinking forum prompts starts with, give them a clear reason to respond to others. So not enough to say, respond by this deadline, respond to 2 classmates. What does it mean to respond to 2 classmates? Go beyond text. Forum prompts or forum posts don't have to be just X number of words, text, text, text. There's so much more you can do with it. You can do pictures, you can do video, you can do other things. Don't be bound by the number of words. And I think this is sometimes what causes a lot of this forced response. I completely understand that sometimes you do want to give them a minimum number of words, because otherwise, how do you assess somebody who wrote 100 words versus somebody who wrote 2 words, right? So I understand that, but when it comes to responding to somebody, maybe you shouldn't be so concerned about the number of words that go into the response. Also, there's no rule that says that the initial post has to be longer or larger or more significant than the response post, right? Let's think about it from a different angle. What if the response post is the most substantial part of it? And I always like to encourage discovery, autonomy, or creativity in my students. I want them to be engaged in it as opposed to feel forced to it. And scaffold if needed. Of course, novice, intermediate learners are going to need more help, useful words and phrases, sentence starters, etc. Whereas the advanced level learners can fly on their own much more. Other important considerations to rate discussion forum prompts, to have realistic expectations, right? Are they able to do what you want them to do? And I mean that in every possible sense of the question, not just in terms of proficiency, although proficiency is absolutely key. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of online translators, a lot of cheating, so to speak, because they're just not able to do that quite yet. But also, are they able to create what you want them to create? If you were a student in your own class, could you do it? So if you're going to expect them to write 300 words on something, could you do it? Could you write 300 words relatively easily, right? You have to put yourself in their shoes. Instructions have to be absolutely clear. If you have too many steps where things can go wrong, that, you know, is a recipe for frustration and is a recipe for, I don't want to do this anymore. So the instructions have to be relatively simple and clear, and they have to be feasible. And what do I mean by that? I've seen forum posts or prompts where it says, respond to 2 classmates who don't have any replies yet. And when you think about it, sometimes that's impossible, right? You might go in and then everybody has replies except for just one person. So what are you supposed to do? Just wait around until somebody posts and then post as soon as, I mean, it's just, it feels like then what happens? Like, do you not meet the requirement because you couldn't post to 2 classmates who don't have any replies yet? And again, we're focusing so much more on the instructions than not actually exchanging ideas, which is the problem, right, that caused all of this. Include connections to what others have said. What does that mean, right? That to me is not clear. Is it enough to say similar to somebody else and then that's it? That's the only connection I have to make? And the last point I have there, believe it or not, I never thought I would have to include it, but yes, you have to retrain the students. In one of the courses this summer, you know, all of my forums have ideas, you'll see them later, right? But they have instructions for the initial post and they have instructions for the response post, and they're very specific. And here I go, and I see all of these generic responses similar to the, I'm glad you like bread, I like bread too, right? And I'm like, what is going on here? Why are they all responding these generic things when that's not what the instructions said? And that's because the students are so used to just being told to respond. Whatever that means, just post something. And so we had to retrain the students to tell them that's not what we do here. You have to respond in this particular way. This is what we want you to do with this information. And have separate deadlines. I think this is absolutely crucial. If you have something where there is an initial post and a response post and you have it all due the same day, that's a recipe for disaster, because what do students do? They wait until the last day to post, and then everybody's posting at the same time, or, you know, people have a hard time finding somebody they can respond to, etc. So separate deadlines are absolutely crucial, including more than 2. You might need a 3rd deadline, right? So an initial post, the response, and then one more follow-up, for example. Still, the deadlines need to be feasible. I've seen examples where it is, you know, you have to respond to 3 people, but your responses should be on different days. Oh, good Lord. I have to go grab my calendar. I have to make sure that I remember. It's just, it's not feasible. We have to work with the students. If this is asynchronous, we want to be flexible. It cannot be something that it becomes so rigid that, again, they're only paying attention to the instructions or to the requirements. And then they're losing points on technicalities. A couple more things to consider. Integration with the rest of the course. The forum should not be just an add-on that nobody looks at or something that you just have to do. You need to bring it back to the rest of the course. So sometimes are things that you can then use in class. Sometimes it's more of the follow-up, right? So more like to conclude the topic, but it needs to be clear how it's integrated. In fully online classes, one way that instructors do this is by sending a little wrap-up or a little follow-up message, or sometimes personalized messages based on what the students are sharing. But it needs to feel that it's integrated and it's not just this side assignment that somebody's going to grade and nobody really looks at anymore. And potential concerns or issues, it's good to anticipate things like, what happens if 2 or more students post at the exact same time? Will that ruin your instructions or not, right? So when you create your prompts, you need to anticipate things like that and figure out whether that will work or will not work. In most cases, you can be flexible and that doesn't ruin things, so to speak, but it depends on what your plans are, right? So it's just a matter of anticipating potential concerns or issues. Same with using different tools. What if a student doesn't want to use that particular tool? What's going to be your plan B? It's always good to have, to anticipate these concerns. Okay, so here we go to the ideas and examples, and I have lots of them. I know that people have been posting comments or questions. I just see the little pop-up, but we'll have time at the end. So the probably quintessential infographic would be something like somebody describes, somebody guesses, right? You need to read the description and guess what the person is describing. And you can do that with many things. So for the novice level learners, we have something like describe a fictional or famous family from a movie, a book, a TV show, or maybe just somebody famous. And then the person has to read it, and then the response post is to guess what it is. Describe a place, and guess what that place is. Describe an image or work of art from a website. So for example, we give the students the link and we say, from this website, we use a travel blog in Spanish that has absolutely beautiful images. And you say, everybody has to use this website, the pictures here, choose one of those, describe it. And so then the person has to guess which one of all those images the person chose to describe based on the description. You can also use work of arts, for example, WikiArt or Google Arts and Culture. Something else you can do similar to description, but different, would be a Google virtual tour. So you play where in the world. And I'll show you an example here of a tour. If I can navigate it, hang on. Oh, Zoom is not letting me. Oh, goodness. Let's see if I can do. There we go. So what you see here, can everybody see the screen? Let's make sure that that's happening.
Yes, we can.
Okay, okay. So what you see here, this is Google Tour. And so it's 360-degree images, very, very easy to use. And so the students would create different scenes right here. I just created to show you an example, right? With clues. And so the student can, the other student, you share with a link, right? You share it here. And the student can then look around, right? There's a flag there, right? There are things. Okay, it looks like, is this Spanish? Oh, wait, yep, this is Spanish. So we're in a place that they speak Spanish. It looks like maybe something European. I don't know. Oh, here's a clue, right? And so the student, the initial poster, would prepare these clues, right, along the way, so to speak, right? And then they go to the next scene, right? So here's another one. So here's another clue, right? So I don't know if people can see it. Oh, people already guessed. Yes, Buenos Aires. Very good. Okay, well, so we are in Buenos Aires. So if you were a student here, you would guess, right? So your response post would be to guess where we are. And you can set it, obviously I created something relatively easy, and Buenos Aires is my hometown, so, but you can set it in different ways, right? Maybe you can be, it has to be maybe in a country, maybe you don't want it to be a big city, right? Like you want them to play around with it more. And as creepy as it is, Google has pictures of just about everywhere in the world, including inside buildings. So your students can create tours that are much harder to figure out. I just created an easy one so you would see what it was. So that's one idea. The other possibility would be following instructions, right? So the initial post is to give directions. The response post is to create a video screencast following those directions. And so here's an example, and it's a silent video. It doesn't have to be audio because the other student basically wrote down the directions, right? So where you start, where do you end up? And so this is very simple using just screencasting and PowerPoint. PowerPoint has a built-in annotation tool or pencil, I don't know what it's called. And so here, just using PowerPoint, you can just draw the route of whatever the other student, the initial post said it would be. So this would be the response post to it. So it would be almost like being in class doing an infographic task where one person gives directions and the other person is following that route or guessing. Let me see if it'll let me go back. Here we go. Okay. Something else in terms of guessing, if you will, is the Price is Right. We do this also with our novice learners. They have to create a video presentation with pictures and voice narration in the target language, showcasing a house for rent. And it can be very simple, right? Simple sentences, almost like bullet points. And they can use Adobe Spark, which would be the easiest tool to use, but we give them choices. If they do not want to do Adobe Spark, they can just use Google Slides and Screencast-O-Matic, or we have our own institutional screencasting software or platform. So again, give them choices. If they don't feel comfortable doing one, they can use a different one. And the students they choose different tools, which I think is fantastic. And they get very creative in terms of like the pictures and where the house is, but they don't include the price. The reply post is to guess how much rent is per month based on the info provided in the video, right? So look, the reply post, as you can see, is very short, right? It can be just 1 or 2 sentences, and that's fine. Because for us, it's not about just stretch, 100 words, 50 words. So it shouldn't be about the number of words. It should be just about engaging with meaning, right? And responding purposefully. Another way that you can do that would be something like put something in order, right? So where the initial post is to perhaps list the routine or events in a story or film, if you have more advanced learners, but not in the right order. And then the reply post would be to list the events in the correct order. The classic truth and lies, right? So that, for example, 5 things you did last weekend, some true, some false. And the response post would be to indicate which ones they think they're probably false, right? And you can do this. It doesn't have to be 5 things, obviously. You can do this with many things, including summaries or references to something you have read, for example, and maybe some details are not quite right. And the response post is about correcting those details. Recommendations are always fun. So for example, you see on Facebook, people are posting this like, does anyone know a good tool for X and Y? This is what I need, right? So the student is told to describe a situation for which they are seeking recommendations. So it could be something like a blind date. It could be something like a place to study. It could be something like a new restaurant to try. And they need to give their classmates some information, right, in order to have a good recommendation for them. And then the response post is to make a recommendation for their classmate based on the information that their situation that they described. A similar one, this one we do in the Spanish in the Professions course, they have to describe their qualities and interests, and the response post is to recommend a career path for their classmates. So again, they have to read and pay attention to what they said and then recommend something based on their classmates' information. Reviews, so you can have them review a restaurant, a store, a movie, a book, a product, or a language learning app. And we do that in one of our courses. We give them a list of different language learning sites and apps that they can try for free. And then they write a review of 2 of them. We have them create a video showcasing the features of that app or that site, right? And maybe the response post could be something like assigning a number of stars based on the review that the classmate provided, or it could be something like adding images, or maybe if you don't have them mention which restaurant or which book or which movie, they could also guess which restaurant, book, or movie the classmate is reviewing. Responding to ands is another way of interacting. So the initial post can be a classified ad for something maybe like roommates, something for sale, a job posting, etc. If you don't want to do something like a classified ad, you can always have them create a flyer for an event. And again, Adobe Spark would be great for that. Canva would also be good for that. And then the response post could be something like questions about that particular job opportunity or what they have for sale, and also expressing interest in either purchasing that or being roommates, etc. And this you can break it up into more than just 2 deadlines, right? So if first they have to ask some questions to make sure they truly understand it and make sure that whether they're truly interested or not, then there can be responses to those questions, and then the final post would be whether they're truly interested in it or not. A simpler forum could be something like the initial post has a list of 4 items, all following some kind of a theme or topic. So for example, reasons why, you know, I study Spanish, for example, things to do in, or tips for, etc. The response post is to add 1 more to the list, and then the follow-up activity is to create an infographic that it contains the 5 items. It doesn't have to be an infographic. It can also be an animated video, for example. Something that is always very fun is the Shark Tank pitch. I don't know if you're familiar with what Shark Tank is. So Shark Tank is a TV show here in the US where different entrepreneurs pitch their ideas for their businesses, whether it's a product or service. Sometimes, obviously, existing businesses too, not just an idea. But for the students, it would be something like a pitch for a new business, whether it is a product or a service. And then the response post would be, which one would you invest in, why, how much, right? So they look at one and they say whether they would invest in that one or not, why, and how much money they would invest in it. And this is also connected to some interpretive communication activity where we saw other businesses. So for example, in Argentina, they have a business that's called a siestario. So it's a place where you go take a nap. And so we talked about whether that would work here in our town or not, and why. And a lot of them say, well, students sleep anywhere right outside, so no, maybe it wouldn't work. I don't think students would go and pay to take a nap. Okay, so for example, right? So then it's like, okay, now your turn. What would really work well here, right? So that would be the follow-up. We would do it in a forum post. Something more fun, silly, just to have a good time, to connect with your learners. Hashtag it. So the initial post is a text and picture. And here I created a fake tweet. I promise you my dog does not have a Twitter account. This is just a fake tweet created with TweetGen. And you have a picture, you can write 140 characters. I think it's a little bit longer than that. And then you can create the account, and then you just post the text and the picture, right? Like you have it here. The reply posts are hashtags. Oh no, I misspelled it. I'm sorry, I'm missing an H. Hashtags. So what hashtag would you give to this particular one? I don't know, hashtag life goals. An alternative similar to this would be the initial post is pictures, and these are pictures that the learners, their own pictures. I'm not talking about the generic Google pictures, right? So this one is a picture I took of my dog. And then the reply post, if you're going with a meme idea, would be, how would you turn this picture into a meme? What would the text say, right? So that can be another just fun game to do, just to build community and to have fun with your students. More ideas with texting, not tweets, would be to guess the characters. We do this in a course where they do a lot of readings of short stories. And so they know a lot of, well, not that they know a lot of, they don't know the characters, but they come to appreciate several characters throughout the semester. And so they can create a texting exchange between 2 characters. They don't say who. As you can see in the picture, hopefully you can see there's a question mark, right, where the name of the character of the person would be. And then they create this texting exchange. This is created with iFakeTextMessage.com. You don't need an account. This is just a screenshot. And then they post it. So the texting exchange, the picture is the post, and then the response post is they have to say who is who. And potentially you can also have them continue the conversation, right? So what would be a couple more exchanges in this texting thread? And another idea would be when you're doing more of the get to know each other and you get more of this community building, you can have an initial post where they have to post an image of an object, person, animal, or place that is relevant to them, but not say anything about it. And it cannot be very obvious, right? Not just a picture of themselves. And then the reply post, or posts plural, there could be more than one, just questions about it. So their classmates take some days, a couple days to write some questions about that picture. And then the follow-up is the responses to that picture, which you can do it in class, right? So maybe if you're teaching hybrid, this could be a way of bringing the forum into the classroom. With more advanced learners, and especially one of the courses I supervise is the composition course, we do a little bit of creative writing. And the initial post is for them to create a video with images and sound or sounds. Some of them choose music, some of them choose actual sound effects. YouTube has a library of free sound effects and music. And then response post is to write a story based on the video. So again, this one is a little bit different in that the response post is where they're writing more than the initial post, but that's perfectly fine. And as a follow-up, you can have them create an ebook with Book Creator, for example, for others to read. So maybe this post is sort of like the first step just to get inspired, just to get those creative juices flowing. And then they work towards creating this ebook where other learners or just anybody else can read it. If you're working with also more advanced learners and you're talking, for example, about character analysis, initial posts could be mind maps or word clouds where they're picking, for example, in this case, adjectives that refer to one of the characters. And then the response post, this is where the other learner has to write the bulk of it. So the initial post is just an image. The response post is who or what does it refer to and why. So connect the words. Why did it say caring? Why defiant? Why torn? Why brave? Why scared, right? So this is more of they have to deduce, if you will, why you think that learner chose those particular words and who is referring to. And it could be that they're thinking of somebody else, right? And that's also very interesting. In other classes that I teach that are more content-based, for lack of a better term, I think forums are great as repositories, meaning our learners go and discover and share information with each other. And a lot of the time that's useful for me when I teach the course in the future, or I can use those resources in class as well. And it's a great way to expand on class content and to have more learner-driven learning. And what do I mean by that? I have the screenshot is in Spanish, I'm sorry, but I'll translate as quickly as I can. So we give them a website, and it's not particularly tied to this topic, right? This could be Spanish in the US. I mean, we could do the same with many others, where you give in the prompt, there's instructions if you are the first person to respond, and instructions if you're not the first person to respond. So if they are the first person to respond, they're supposed to explore that site, make connections to what we have been talking about in class, and then find another site, another article, another video related to that topic, and copy paste the link, and then write 2-3 questions for their classmates about that particular site, article, or video. And then what creates is a chain, right? So when you log in, you just look at the last one and respond to that person. And so, for example, some learner could be, so this is my article, right? So the learner, this one in particular, chose an article related to cultural appropriation. And then these are the questions that the learner wrote. And so if this was the last one in the thread, I would click on this link, I would read that article, I would answer these questions, and then I would propose a new article, a new video with new questions for the next person, and so on. Does it happen that sometimes more than one person replies at the same time? Yes, and that's okay, but it doesn't ruin the thread. At some point, there's always somebody in the last thread. Now, there could be somebody who posted a great article in question nobody replied to because it was the very last person, right, to post. And that's also okay, because then as the instructor, I can go and look at that article, I can look at those questions, and I can even use those in class, or I can use those with other learners as well. And you as the instructor can also reply to them, right? It doesn't mean that just because there's no more learners then nobody cares about the article you chose. You can respond, or my preference would be to then incorporate it into class somehow. There are a lot more tools other than forums out there. I'm sure you are familiar with some of these, probably. VoiceThread, Padlet, Perusall, and Extempore. I don't know if I'm pronouncing them correctly. I am probably not pronouncing them correctly, but we'll just go with this. So let's start with Flipgrid. I forgot to list it there. Flipgrid is a great tool where learners post videos and then they respond with videos. So it's basically like a video forum, if you will. What can you do with Flipgrid? A lot of what I've seen in Flipgrid is here's the prompt and then respond to somebody, similar to the traditional forum, but in video format. Other things you could do with Flipgrid could be something like interviews, where each learner is posing a question. So the initial post is just a question. And then the interviewee, right, the guest of honor, whoever's being interviewed, watches the video and responds, watches the next video and responds, watches the next video and responds. So it's almost like the whole class is interviewing one person asynchronously. And then from there, maybe they need to write the interview report. Giving directions and say the destination, so you can do that in Flipgrid, right? So the initial video is to give directions from one point to where, and then the next person listens to it and then says where you end up. You can also play asynchronous Pictionary. As you can see here in the screenshot, they can respond with video, but as soon as you start the video recording, there's many other things you can do, including uploading a picture, including drawing, right, on a whiteboard. So there's more that you can do in Flipgrid than just a video of your webcam. Padlet is another great tool, easy to use. The free version is limited to 3 Padlets. I know, it's killing all of us. But if you don't want to use, if you're not planning on using it too much, it's just for maybe one time, or you can keep recycling your Padlet, or you only have one course, then it could work for free. And the reason why I like it is because the students can do a lot of things, right? They can post, they can draw, they can vote, they can comment. And I'll show you some examples using the same or similar tasks that I mentioned before, right? So for example, the Pictionary, right? So Padlet lets you draw. I'll double click here. And then if you expand here, there are many things, as you can see. I have it in Spanish, but you can draw, right? So we can draw something and then save, and it will save the drawing. And then the next person goes in and can comment on what is it. You can also do the review activity, where they put the reviews here, and then the next person has to give it a rating, right? So based on what it is, it's probably a 4-star, maybe 3, right? And then here they can write a comment where they can say it's a review of what, which restaurant, and I gave it 4 stars because he doesn't like this and that, but he liked whatever, right? And then the same with the tweet or the hashtagit. They can post the images, and then here in the comments, this is where they can write the hashtags that they think would correspond to that particular tweet. And as you can see, I'm not logged in right now, and the way that I have it set in is anybody can go ahead and comment, and it would, you can play around with the settings if you don't want to do that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to the wrong place. Hang on. All right. Okay, so for the other tool that I mentioned would be VoiceThread. VoiceThread is also a great tool for asynchronous communication. It's not free. There's a free version that allows up to 5 voice threads, which can be limiting depending on how much you're going to use it with your students. So a lot of people do go for the paid account. And I'll show you what I mean by one idea of using VoiceThread, which would be the collaborative visual analysis. So the way that VoiceThread works is you click on this, you can post a comment, and some of the things that you can comment on, you can use audio, video, and you can also draw. There's many things you can do too, but just to show you. So for example, the teacher would post the artwork that they want to analyze together, and maybe the teacher will start. And then the next person would go. Creo que representa que necesitamos escucharnos. ¿Qué representa este ojo? Then the next person would respond. So I think you get the gist, right? So the way it plays as a thread, and it's relatively simple to use. These are just audio comments, and then you would just click on reply, and then you can do the drawing tool to maybe point out a different element in the picture and so forth. It can also be used for peer feedback. If the learners are posting maybe a short paragraph and the other their classmates have to give them feedback on it. Peer feedback is definitely another way of synchronous communication. And we tend to pay a lot of attention to peer feedback if we're supposed to make revisions on it. So there's definitely a purpose to it. Another tool that I like a lot is Perusall. And I don't know if you have heard of it or not, but it's basically a collaborative annotated reading tool. It is free. You can use it as a whole class. You can use it as small groups. It is free. Let me clarify. It is free if you upload your own PDFs. I think it's different if you want to use some copyrighted materials that they have. But don't quote me on that. I know that if you upload your own PDFs, you can use it for free. Super easy to use. It looks beautiful. I've tried many of the annotated reading tools, and some of them just, they don't look very professional. They're fun, but maybe not so professional. And Perusall, it's just beautiful and so easy to use. And as you can see here in the screenshot, the comment can be formatted in so many ways. You can even mention somebody, you can even put emojis, you can do links, pictures, right? There's so many things that they can do to post comments. So basically you would highlight a part of the text, and then you would write your comment or even your response to somebody else. And Perusall creates, if you click on the highlight, it creates what it calls a conversation, right? Everybody that has commented on that and responded to each other just based on this tiny highlighted part. And I think it can be great for more advanced learners, for sure. Novice learners, well, I think it might be a little bit limiting, maybe what you can do with it, or the type of comments that you're expecting. But I would say intermediate and up, I think that there could be a lot of use to it. And even if novice, all they can do is read a simple text and add a picture that goes with it, I think that is still useful. What I would say is to do annotated reading in groups that functions well. There are a few things that you need to keep in mind. You don't want groups that are too big where the conversation can truly become difficult to follow. And you also want to give them some guidelines as to what good annotated reading could look like, so that you don't end up with a lot of comments that are just basically, this is interesting, I like this. Right? How can we get them to go beyond that? So for example, something I would do is just to tell them, post a question, a reaction, and a response. So as they're reading an entire article, that's all I'm expecting of them. Can they engage more if they want to? Absolutely. But at the very least, everybody needs to have a question, a reaction, and one response. Extempore is another tool that we use in our courses. I really like it. How much do we use it for asynchronous communication? We can debate that. We use it a lot for individual responses, in which case there's not a lot of interactivity. However, we have also used it for group responses. And so what you see here, I understand that probably is not looking very clear. This would be what a asynchronous group in Extempore looks like. The student logs in, the student sees the prompt, and then they see the first response. They can play, they play the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, and then boom, the recording starts, your turn, right? So now you need to add to it. They can come back to it, so they can respond to somebody else. And in that case, they just see the last part that they didn't see. They don't have to listen to the whole conversation again. The reason why I like Extempore a lot is because one challenge that we had in our online courses was that students were using scripted responses or Google Translate, and we wanted some tool that could capture spontaneous responses to the best of their abilities. They don't have to be perfect. And we want them to get over that idea that we're expecting perfection and that they need to script everything out, without having to make an appointment with every single student, because that would be challenging. And Extempore provided precisely that, right? So if you've ever taken a test like the OPIC or even the AP, right, where they hear a prompt or they see a prompt and the recording starts, right? They don't have time to be preparing excessively. That is precisely what Extempore does. So I highly recommend it. It's not free. There's a free trial. There's a free version of it, yes. So you may want to check it out and try it out with your students. One small thing I'll say about Extempore is learners need to get used to it. They are so used to being able to control when they can record and how much they can prepare, etc., that if you're going to set it so that learners have to record as soon as they see the prompt, you're going to have to get them used to that. Believe it or not, we keep getting comments about how much they like that. At first, they were like terrified and they thought, I cannot do it. And they now like it, that they don't have to script everything out and they can just speak spontaneously. So give it a shot if you want to try it. So my takeaways for today are, first and foremost, give them clear purposes for posting and responding. And above all, think outside the text box. Don't be bound by word limits or the fact that it has to be text or the fact they have to use X number of vocab words. Just break free from all those chains and just think about how can you get them to be more creative in how they're engaging with each other in forums. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing what questions you have or what ideas you have to share. You can join our Technology for Language Teaching group on Facebook if you are on Facebook. I think a lot of you are there already. And for tools and resources, many of the ones I talked about, but many, many more, go.illinois.edu/TLTL, which stands for Technology for Language Teaching and Learning. So that's what I have. I saw the chat kept popping up.
There's lots of great ideas.
Lots of things. So I don't know if you can, so help me, Shannon. Where were the questions?
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Florencia, for so many great ideas. First, most important question is that many people are hoping that you will be sharing your PowerPoint.
Yes, yes. I can post it in this site.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, if you go to this go.illinois.edu/TLTL, maybe I can start a new little section there. I have several things. So there's a section for tech tools. There's a section for resources for Spanish in the US, professional development. So maybe in the professional development, I can add a link to it and maybe save it as like Google Slides or something like that. No problem.
That would be great. Thank you. And we do have about 7 minutes for questions, and we'll do as many as we can. And
oh my God, I tried so hard. I always
just have so many ideas. It's great. But if there are questions that go unanswered, then we encourage you to join the Tech for Language Teaching or the IALLT Facebook group. And those are places where we can ask questions like this all the time, or the IALLT listserv. So there are plenty of places to go and ask some more questions. The other, so I'll just try to pick from the questions. One of the questions recently was, because you've shown us so many tools, many people are saying, we're encouraged not to choose too many tools. And
Yes.
I'm assuming, Florencia, that you're showing us a bunch of choices and encouraging us to choose a few of those.
100%. Absolutely. Yes. No, I would not overdo it, and I don't overdo it. Keep in mind, I supervise several courses. And so I don't use all of these. So for example, Perusall, I might use it with one course that is about reading. I might use it with my graduate seminar, right? But I'm not gonna just use it because I think it's great and everybody should use it. Same with Extempore, we use it in the 4th semester online course, but it might not work for other courses where maybe the live sessions are, you know, more than enough. So you need to pick and choose what works for your goals. You always have to start with your goals in terms of language acquisition, in terms of what do you want them to be able to do by the end of the course, and then you work backwards, and usually the tool is the last thing you choose. So yeah, no, I'm not saying you have to use all of these. No.
All right, I figured that, yeah. And another set of questions, there were several questions kind of related to each other, was about evaluation and rubrics and how do you evaluate these discussion boards. And this is kind of a general question, but maybe you can answer generally or more specifically about specific ones.
Yes, absolutely. That is a great, great question. My rubrics are not based on the technology. My rubrics go back to the proficiency level of the learners. And I'll give you an example anecdote. So in one of the 4th semester online courses that I just redesigned, the rubric is basically the learners can do this, right? The learners can express themselves in simple sentences that are comprehensible to a language teacher. And so one of the TAs sent me an email saying, everybody got full credit, is that bad? And I was like, no, that's great. That means that they were able to do what we asked them to do. There's nothing wrong with that. So I always go back to the proficiency level of the students. Did they do what I wanted them to do? Were they able to accomplish with the language what I wanted them to do? Minimally, almost, fully, right? Then you can have different categories. But I try to keep it as simple as possible and always going back to were they able to express meaning in a comprehensible way for their level? And if so, then it means that they get full credit.
All right. Do you have any suggestions about how to organize all these things? Because if you have a whole bunch of, some people were saying, we can see how it would be great to have discussion boards that were even just short and quick for students to participate in, but then it can get overwhelming with how many there are. Do you have any strategies or suggestions for how to organize these kinds of things?
I'm not sure I fully understand. I'll do my best, and if I don't answer the question, please tell me. So I wouldn't have too many forums due in a week, for example. So I would just have one forum. And even if the forum is something short, to me, that's okay. You may have a separate assignment where is perhaps a bit of a longer writing assignment, but that doesn't mean that, you know, the forum post needs to satisfy the long writing assignment portion of it. I hope that makes sense what I'm trying to say. So to me, I would still keep it at, you know, the number of forums that I want to have in a semester. And if it's one a week, it's one a week. And that's it. And within that forum, there's that prompt of what they're supposed to do, that info gap that they're supposed to do. And then the next week, there might be another one. So that's how I would organize it, but I don't know if that's what the question was, or if it's more about, are there too many learners posting in one place? Then there's something else you can do for that, which is to form groups. And at least in our learning management system, we can just have them post in separate forums, you know, in their own little groups. But I don't know if that was the question or not.
Okay. Do you try to balance written or speaking responses, or do you tell them what they're required to do, or do you leave that up to them, or it depends on the goal? What would you say about written versus spoken?
It's a good question. I think that I think it would probably depend on what I'm asking them to do. So something like the house, right? Showcase a house for rent. It just made a lot more sense to have oral or spoken narration in Spanish going along with pictures, as opposed to here's the paragraph, here are the pictures, right? So it felt more organic for them to do something like a video as opposed to a written post. But that doesn't mean you couldn't do it, right? So the same with the Google tour. It also allows for spoken. So maybe the clues can be spoken instead of written. I would personally be okay with either one. I don't think I would force one or the other. As long as in the entire course, there's a balance, right? And we're not always typing, right? Or we're not always talking. So as long as overall in the course, there's a balance between modalities, I think I'm open to either one, depending on what feels more organic for that particular task.
What would you recommend for people whose students have limited skills with technology or access to technology?
Oh, that is a good question. I wish I had a great answer to it. The best answer that I can give you is to be flexible and to have a plan B, C, and D. To be able to accept other formats that may not be exactly what you were looking for, but that perhaps they still meet the requirements. So somebody said in our Facebook group, for example, that some students were not able to access Google. And so what do you do with that, right? How do you do the Google tour? Well, I would say then that's fine. They can just do just a PowerPoint with images and narrate it. And it would be an alternative, and it, you know, sort of meets the same purpose. So you have to be flexible and not so strict about what it should look like exactly, and always going back at what are you trying to get them to accomplish language-wise. But
Again, thank you so much.
The issue of, you know, if a student does not have internet access is huge, and I completely understand, and that is much more difficult to overcome, especially if we have to teach fully online but they don't have web access. I don't have a solution for that, unfortunately, but that is definitely in the pandemic, it's a big problem, and I think it would just be a matter of figuring out different types of assignments, and I'm not sure what that would be. That is a very, very difficult challenge, and I hear you. I just don't have a solution for the lack of internet access in the context of the pandemic, where they cannot even go to a public library. That is very challenging.
Definitely. We're pretty much out of time, and we really appreciate your time and expertise, Florencia, today. And we do invite everyone to continue the conversation in other forums. Yes. I do want to just encourage everyone to register for 2 webinars that are coming up that I think are going to be really useful. July 10th is providing leadership in world language education now more than ever. And so that's going to be great. Please register. I've put the registration link. And then July 29th, we're going to have a panel, and the topic is online, hybrid, high flex, and high stress, preparing for fall 2020. So please sign up for that one as well. We will look forward to seeing everyone. And thanks again, Florencia, and thanks everyone else for your ideas that you shared in the chat.
Thank you, Shannon and Florencia. Great webinar.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. It's really wonderful.